All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode. As always, I'm very excited for my guest today. We just had a little bit of a conversation before we popped on, so I'm not going to say too much about her, but can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Hanna Cha. I'm a Korean American storyteller who also illustrates and writes, right now, mainly children's books. So far, I have illustrated a few books: The House Before Falling into the Sea, Truth About Dragons, Circle Round, and I wrote and illustrated Tiny Feet Between the Mountains.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Hannah, I am such a fan of your work. And I've kind of seen the progression in regards to, the first book to Truth About Dragons.
Mhm,
And before we get into Truth About Dragons, this is a question that I've asked
mhm.
on mostly all of my podcasts. Tell me about little Hannah.
Oh, little Hannah. So for me, I was born in South Carolina, but I don't remember much because since then I've been moving around a lot with my parents. My dad at the time was studying in the States, which meant going to like different laboratory or like university that would accept them as like a student. So I moved around a lot, lived mostly my childhood in Texas, and then I moved to Korea for 5 years
Wow.
for until middle school, and then finally moved back to Maryland for high school, and then went to Rhode Island for my college, and then now settling in Boston for 5 to 6 years now. So, well, who knows? I might jump away somewhere else.
Wow. I mean, I knew this about you, but I think that is so interesting, because I teach internationally, and a lot of these
Mm,
kids go back and forth from different states to different countries. And I always find these kids so interesting. Sometimes we call
mhm,
those kids third culture kids because, they experience so much and they go through so many different school systems. But can you talk about your middle school experience? You said you spent a lot of your middle school in Korea. What did
yes.
that look like?
It's very I really like the term third culture because I think I never heard something that compassed something so well, because it really is like a weird interdisciplinary between two cultures and
Mhm,
you make it your own.
mhm.
So actually I should have clarified. I was in Korea until like just the start of middle school, so it's more like, now thinking about it, elementary, third grade to middle school. But it was the most informative time of my years because I think that's when you start like developing more interesting cultures and languages. And I think that in 5 years just kind of helped me root that I'm Korean
Mm.
because I was just in the culture, but also it's the most confusing time of my life because I'm speaking English and I was very blessed for all this experience in America, but in Korea at that time too, it was like around the 2000s. It wasn't that common to have like a very fluent English speaking Korean looking child showing up in elementary school.
Mhm.
So definitely it made me actually pretty introverted, and when I came back to the States, I found I was actually, like, more closer to an extrovert. It's a very interesting, like, how
Mhm.
the cultures also shift your personality.
Mhm.
I'm probably rambling a little bit, going back
No,
and
you're
forth,
okay.
but I am describing a little bit like that's how it feels, like you're just thrown into this world that it says it's yours and you look like it,
Mhm.
but because of your childhood experience so much utter freedoms and so many different cultures, there's like this backlash of like, am I like good enough? And then
Mhm.
later it becomes a conversation of whether you're good enough for like either America or Korean.
Wow.
Mhm.
I totally understand that because that is exactly what a lot of my kids talk about.
Mm.
I teach 3rd grade, but I've had experience with upper grades and middle school,
Mhm.
and they really find challenging of fitting in, specifically kids who don't look, North American, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Right?
That doesn't even mean anything because it's just so like, America's the most diverse just
Exactly.
ethnicity and culture-wise,
Uh-huh.
but anywho.
Yeah. Those kids are it's so interesting because it's an English speaking school, but all the kids are technically like EAL, where they're like learning
Mm,
English. But
yes.
majority of them come in speaking English. And I do wonder, like, what does that look like when they go back to their home country, whether that
Yes.
is Korea, whether it is, we have kids from all over the place, and they
Mm,
don't sound the same. They don't speak the
yes.
language the same because one of the things I'm noticing is that what their parents are doing, which I think is incredible, I think it's incredible,
Mhm.
is that they are also studying their home language or being asked to speak their
Yes.
home language at home. And I mean, I know it's a lot of work because the kids always
Yeah.
complain about like having to
Yes.
speak all these languages, but I do think that is so important for a kid to be able to speak in their home language as well as English or whatever other language that they're working on.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
I totally understand what you're saying, and that is very difficult, very very difficult. Yeah. Um,
Yes.
I want to talk about RISD just because it's so. I mean, working with Oge, and then literally, I mean, maybe 5 or 6 days ago, talking to Gracie. There's
Mhm.
something about these RISD kids, like what is it? Like what is it about RISD? What got you there, and what are some of the experiences that kind of shaped who you are as an illustrator?
Mm. I think this is I think RISD, at least for me, what I loved about it was when I was in freshman year, they don't hone you into just one major. So you get to experience all sorts of different interdisciplinary classes from like 3D, 2D, and you kind of more explore how your creative process is
Hmm.
even before you get to a major that you really like. But it also helped me always think, oh, then I can always get back because you try a medium.
Hmm.
It's a little bit less of a hurdle to try and go back to it if you ever want to do it
Hmm.
again. And I chose illustration because I knew I loved stories. That one I knew for sure. And it seems like a good middle ground between connecting with people through stories that are a little bit more familiar while not being too fine artsy and like really focusing of your inner world
Hmm.
and like trying to connect people through for them to reach out to you. I feel like illustration is a little bit more you're reaching out to the people and you're creating a conversation. At
Hmm.
least that's how I see it.
Hmm.
And I think at that time, illustration is more about, or for RISD, we had really great teachers who focused on children's books and just storytelling in general.
Hmm.
Um,
I love that.
but
I think
mhm.
that I love that everyone across the board, I mean, it's only been 3 of you, but I feel like that's a chunk, has talked about
Yeah.
great teachers, and teachers
Hmm.
who really love what they do, and
Yes.
there is always a thing about people staying too long, but at
Mm.
the same time eh, at the same time,
Mhm.
there is
Yeah.
something rooted in that in regards to if
Yeah.
they are still producing amazing talent and guiding them on a path that is like successful and they're still loving what they're doing. I think that says a lot about who they are as
Mhm.
teachers and educators. I asked this question to Gracie as well, and I'm curious what you're going to say. Is was there a specific experience, a lesson, or a teacher? You don't have to name them at Rizzi that has influenced you in regards to the work that you do.
Um, Definitely I'm trying to condense this. Um, hmm, Sorry, can you repeat the
Yeah, of
question
course. So
again?
I'm thinking, I was thinking a lot about your time there,
Mhm,
and I
mhm,
know that during your time, you would have met tons of amazing educators
mhm,
who influence what you do.
mhm,
Was there a specific educator or teacher
mhm,
that you would say really influenced like who you are as a illustrator, or a specific like experience that you would have had through a lesson or an activity that has really shaped, or even like shifted your mind a little bit about how
mhm,
you create what you do?
mhm. Definitely, there are a few teachers who helped me with that, but I think is because when I got into illustration, I had this preconception of what it should look like.
Mm,
But um, as I meet these teachers, and they also worked in the industry, they helped understand like this is also a business. You're also your own brand. There needs to be a drive, but also um, just there is a connection of people, and you're going to be working with a lot of people. So
mhm,
they helped kind of ground those ground rules to me because kind of I feel like every art student that shows up into any institution, they are chosen in a way because the institution wants them. So
mhm,
they were in their own pond and they go to this institution. Now they're in like a river or
mm,
like lake.
mhm,
So you're so focused on yourself. You're also basically I found these institutions help me converse and help me able to talk about my work too
mhm,
and be open. I used to be too close to the heart with a lot of my works to a point that it can be kind of like secluding.
mhm,
But I think the teachers equipped me with the vocabulary to talk about my work
mhm.
without getting too hurt about it and being able to like develop past it.
Yep, and that can be so hard, and again, I always think about the kids that I have, and I teach 8, 9-year-olds, but, like,
Mhm.
the ability to take the ability to take feedback is like a skill. That is
It
like
is a skill.
right, that's not something that you are just born with. I
Mhm.
think it takes practice in regards to listening and actually you can listen and then not take the feedback or listen
Exactly.
and wanna take the feedback but not know what to do. There's so many
Mhm.
layers to being able to take feedback and implementing that into new work or new learning, and I'm glad that that was something that you were able to take from your experience. Um, your work is so dreamy, it is so bright and so vibrant, um, and I mean, we have to talk about Truth About Dragons a little bit.
Yes.
So some of my favorite spreads, and I wrote them down, there's a couple of them. One of
Mhm.
the spreads is, kinda about it's like 2 dragons, one's, like, blue, one's red, and, I think on the page it says something about, both journeys, are yours to take or something like that?
Oh,
Yes.
yes, yes.
Um,
Mm.
I love that page so much. I love that page so much. Can you
I'm so
tell me
happy.
yeah, I mean, it's just such a I mean, just the way that you're able to manipulate colors, and
Mm.
bring life to a page is
Mhm.
fascinating.
Mhm.
Can you tell me about your creative process a little bit? Because it's so dope. It really is.
This book was really like a dream project for me because for a while I love fantasy, but
Mm,
of course I was worried of will I be a little bit pigeonholed to being Korean culture artist. But someone did, took the chance on me and I was like, it's all or nothing. I really need to show my love for fantasies. And I took this as a project and because I love mixed medium, I tried to use that as my advantage. For the Western Dragon, I actually used only ink nibs and watercolor brushes
mm,
for that section, and for the Eastern Dragon, I used Sumi ink brushes that I brought from Korea.
wow.
And I am happy that it was able to keep my style so it's not too jarring between the two dragons. But I do love like the integrity that the materials sometimes keep in the artwork.
Mhm,
Um, and for that spread, it's very interesting because children's books is such a long project. It takes about like sometimes a year or even two. I needed to make sure that and when you're working that long, your skill level increases,
sure.
and you need to make sure that the beats hit consistently.
Mhm,
So for me, I knew some parts of the book that needs to be really good, so I kept them in the middle part of my work schedule. So for a lot of the spreads that I deem like it can be experimental and figuring out my vibe or how I want to do it, I'll do those spreads in the beginning.
mhm,
And then as I go to the middle where I'm most excited and I feel like I am in my like I don't need to rush. like this is the perfect time to work on it,
Mhm.
I'll find those beats that I really want to work on. And the spread you just talked about is that one.
Mhm.
So I'm happy that means it hits and I
It
did a good
does.
job. I'm
It's
happy to
oh my
hear
gosh.
that.
It is, and for those of you who haven't read it, I mean, it's just stunning. I can see it I could just see it blown up somewheres, like in a frame, and just like the way that it pops off of the page is just it's just incredible. It's really, really incredible. So thank you. And it's so interesting. I think Oge has mentioned
Mhm,
this as well. There are certain pages that you feel like you can just jump in and, they're a
mhm,
little bit they're what the ones that you're most excited about. And it's so
mhm,
fascinating because when I look at illustrations, and oftentimes now I'm looking at them as a writer, and it's
mhm.
like all the pages are incredible. It's just like it's like, oh, that one I mean, I get there are certain pages in a book that are supposed to strike, feelings and influence and all those things,
Mhm.
but this book, I mean, you really did a incredible job with each and every
Thank you
page.
so much.
Yeah, no, you
For me, I have biggest respects for writers though, because for illustrators, I think of the image first, but the writing comes so much later.
mm,
So the fact that there are creatives who thinks in words first, I think is so brave.
mm,
Because for me, I already know what things look like, but everything else feels so vast. So to
mm,
choose a poetic word that can encompass what the art is trying to say, I
mhm,
think is also
mhm.
I have bigger respects for people or just writers.
I mean, yeah, like, but you do both of them. You do, right?
Technically.
You
It's
do,
just like an
you
imposter
do. It's
syndrome.
there, it's on the paper, there's proof.
It's it's true, it's true.
Oh, so, Anna, you have a furry friend.
Mhm.
Do you still have a furry friend?
I do have my furry
You do?
friend, probably sleeping somewhere.
Tell us about your furry friend.
So I have a cat named Hobac, and I actually got him right after college, and it was one of my biggest buckets list because I love pets and I love animals, but my mom just is terrified. It's not even allergy; she's just very terrified with anything with fur. And I remember me and my brother being like, "But we have hair; it should be okay. Why aren't you scared of us?" And it's like, "I don't know. I'm just scared." So basically after that I was determined to get like a cat, and I'm just happy that he landed in my life. Funny story is he's from my professor. um,
Wow.
my professor was walking her dog, and she was coming back and realized, in the shadow something like scurried in her house
Mhm.
with her dog, and I was like, what is it? And it was like a little kitten that was Hobak. And this kitten was very young, but still like just loved humans.
Mhm.
But at the time, they had a cat, kind of like an elderly cat, who just was like, "No, I do not want this kitten in
Wow.
my house," and was just like beating the kitten up to a point. A professor was like to her previous students, "Is there anyone who would love
Who's
a cat?"
interested? Uh-huh.
And I just like raised my hands up in like the chat as much as I can. It's like, please, please let me have it. I'll be such a good parent. And I keep true to that word. So that professor's now that cat's
Wow.
godparent.
That's incredible. That's
Yeah.
incredible. So how long have you had the cat for?
Now like 5 to 6 years and
Wow.
still acts like a kitten, but I forget how old he is. And I was like, oh, middle age. Now
Uh-huh.
he's a middle-aged man.
I'm not I mean, I used to be a really
Mhm,
big pet person, kind
mhm,
of. I had dogs growing up. Never really was a big
mhm,
cat person. But
mhm,
since I've been abroad, I don't know if it's
mhm.
by choice, but it's also just hard to travel with animals.
It is very true,
Right?
so
So
true.
we've been living in a lot of different countries, and I see not the horror stories, but just like the trouble that people have with transitioning with animals, or
It's
when they
very
have to go
true.
out of the country, like they have to get
Mhm.
babysitters and like all this
Yeah.
stuff. And I was kind of like, yeah,
It's an investment,
it's a lot.
so
It's definitely an
yeah.
investment for sure, which is totally fine. Which is totally fine. Um, But I think for us right now, we haven't had a pet,
Yeah.
but I really do like animals. I definitely do
Mhm.
like animals. So you only have 1.
Only have 1, definitely because if we do happen to travel, it's easier with one, of course.
Ah, of course.
But we haven't tried international travel with him yet, but he's definitely good with cars and all the such.
Mhm.
But I love having a cat because it helped me be observational in a way.
Yeah.
Because I was so familiar with dogs. Even, like my grandparents had dogs, and their gestures and everything is so clear.
Mhm.
But with cats, it helps. I guess it helps that I'm also very observant.
Mhm.
So just seeing just the little gestures, I can tell like, oh, he doesn't like this. Very just like just the cues and finding that rhythm is very soothing for me with a
Mm.
cat.
I like that. I like that.
Mhm.
I have a question for you. I have this question written down.
Mhm.
It's long, but it shouldn't be too difficult. The
Yes,
question
no worries.
Yeah, so the question was, your work explores nuance in cultural identity and family and immigrant experiences.
Mhm.
Like, how have you has your own experiences, of navigating between different cultures informed the way that you approach storytelling?
I think in a way because I think about this so much, this is the easy question
Good.
for me. See, like, being, like, that 3rd culture, like you said,
Mhm,
makes me someone who's, like, in between a translator or even a mediator.
mhm,
So, what happens and I think somehow that links to how I'm pretty observant. It's probably because I've been thrusted into different cultures, and I wanted to do both cultures so well, I end up observing, like, okay, what is deemed normal here and what is acceptable, like, in
mhm,
Korea America. And then I am also thankfully like blessed with parents who taught me the language. And I think because I have good relationships with them, it made me want to work harder to retain my Korean language.
mhm,
So I'm still really fluent in writing, speaking, and talking in Korean. So my favorite pastime is to find like, okay, what words are in Korean that they don't have in English?
mm,
And what is in English that actually takes a really long time in Korean, or even though there is a word, it's not quite right. And in that kind of thinking space helps me navigate in my works of like for art is more like what are people used to seeing?
mhm,
What do I need to explain more in my art?
mhm,
But thankfully right now where I am, Korea has been pretty prolific in like a lot of people's lives. I'm very thankful that people are used to some of like culture, hanbok, like the clothing or
mhm.
even the food. The food. I'm so happy people are accepting it because when I was younger, definitely was not the case.
Yeah.
But now I can talk about it and people are open to it. So I can go one step further
Mhm.
or can do a little bit more of a deep dive into the deeper parts of Korea without needing to explain it too much that the story gets convoluted.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I guess
Mhm,
you may have already answered the question. So,
mhm,
from my end as a writer, my writing is sent out to the illustrator. What
mhm.
types of stories like spark your interest or get you excited, about illustrating?
For me, it's writing that I can see that I can take to another next step. Because
Mm,
for writing, it's you're creating like a space, like an atmosphere for the art to reside. And I'm thinking, what can I add detail wise to just really almost ornate the text to bring it out more?
mhm,
And also like adding my personal experiences to it.
mhm,
I'm thinking a little bit more of, I think my recent book that came out is The House Before Falling into the Sea. And this book is where the writer's experience of opening her mom's experience opening up her house to um, immigrants or fleeing refugees when Norse was coming down to the South
mhm.
area. And I found out while working on this book, my grandma was actually one of the refugees
Oh
who
my
like
gosh.
lead down to all the way to Busan too. Some people like stop at different places, but she went all the way to Busan. So I was like, I asked her story and her perspective and what she enjoyed, even
Mhm,
though, of course, of the whole situation.
mhm,
Um, And I found like, oh, I can add a little bit more of the hopefulness or what she found enjoyable. She loved that she was able to be around children her age,
Mhm.
which I thought was very interesting. Where she was just with adults and she was like the only kids, and there weren't many kids running around. But through this traumatic experience, in a way, she was able to be with more kids that she could talk to. And she got the opportunity to learn
Mhm.
actually because there were schools also fleeing with them. So they
Wow.
had makeshift tent schools. So she got the education she probably wouldn't have gotten if without the war. So it's just interesting how because we have two different experience, we can make a better okay, not a better product, it's a better story.
Yeah. Yeah, if
Mhm.
you feel connected, it makes me think about the story that I did with Oge, and I'm from Canada, from the East Coast. She is from, Providence, and it's so it like, she said she read the story and she instantly connected to it, and it's like, I'm this little black boy from Preston, Nova Scotia, and she lives in this other place in America, but she somehow was able to make connections to a lot of experiences. She says she thought about her brother, she's thought about family. I feel like that must be one of the big things for illustrators, like, what can
Mhm.
they connect with, in regards to
Yes.
their own experiences that they can easily start to think of ideas of what those images may look like, and
Mhm.
you do a phenomenal job of that. You do a
Thank
phenomenal
you
job
so
of that.
much.
Yeah.
And I can say, like, I'm from then that explains why that story is so beautiful too,
Mm.
because I love that story so much.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
your
you.
words and Oge's pictures just combined together. Now it explains it.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. Hannah, where can people find you online?
You can find me at www.hannacha.com. Thankfully, I got that domain. Um, but for my other socials, they're all the same, but it is Hannah Uni Cha for. I'm mostly on Instagram. I technically do have a Twitter account, but I don't really use it as much.
Mhm,
But I try to keep all my social presence in Hannah Uni Cha.
mhm. Without the H, people.
Without the H. Without the H.
Without the
Yes.
H.
Yes.
And Hannah, you spoke recently about a book that just came out, and if
Mhm,
you're open to, and I'm
mhm.
very always very cautious about this question because I get it about just like the pressures of writing and all the things, but can you share the book that most recently came out, and if there is anything that you would also like to share in the future?
So the recent book is House Before Falling into the Sea, and it is a story about sorry, let's see.
It's so beautiful.
I don't know why I'm blanking out. Something-
Mm-mm.
Okay, yes. Sorry, one more time.
It's okay.
So it's called House Before Falling into the Sea, and it's about the time of Korean War. And you follow this girl named Kyung and her story of how her family opens up their house to the refugees fleeing the war that's imp- approaching from the north. And it's her experience of this conflict of meeting new people, this new situation, um, and as a kid trying to navigate this really conflicting reality that suddenly befalls her, but also finding hope at the end.
Mhm.
And it's written by An Suk Kwang, and the fun part is that this is actually inspired based on a real experience that her parent had. And I found out through working this project that my I am also from a refugee family who was fleeing from the north. Actually,
Wow.
both my grandmas, but my one grandma from my dad's side is the one who came all the way to Busan. So somehow there might, who knows, they might have connected.
Uh-huh.
There's some connection there.
Uh-huh. Storytelling is so powerful. It is
It's
so
so
powerful, and it's
important.
so cool how 2 story or 1 story can connect another story that can connect another story. Because what's gonna happen, this is what picture books do to people. Someone will read it, they will make a connection, they will give that book to someone else, they'll make a connection, and it just continues on. That's what I love about picture books. And I'm so
Mm.
glad that you're finding that in stories. And it was so much fun talking to you. Let's please do this again sometime.
I would love to thank you again for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.